The skies above Tokyo were clear that autumn morning when Su-min first spotted the anomaly through her telescope. Just a small smudge at first, barely distinguishable from the background stars. By evening, observatories across the globe had confirmed what she suspected. Something large was entering our solar system, and it was slowing down. "This isn't natural," Su-min told her colleague Tae as they huddled over thermal imaging data. "Natural objects don't decelerate like this." Within 3 days, the news broke worldwide. Not one object, but thousands. An armada of ships approaching in tight formation. Global markets crashed. Religious leaders called for calm. Military forces went to high alert. In his small apartment in Seoul, Jin watched the footage loop on his television. A former military communications specialist, he recognized the controlled panic in the generals' voices during press conferences. They were preparing for the worst while trying not to cause public hysteria. The aliens made no attempt to hide their approach. Their massive ships, each the size of a small city, positioned themselves in a loose sphere around Earth's orbit. Dark, angular vessels that absorbed rather than reflected light, beautiful in their terrible symmetry. "They want us to see them," President Han declared in an emergency broadcast. "We are attempting communication on all frequencies. Citizens are advised to remain in their homes but should not panic. We are a unified planet in this moment." The International Space Agency headquarters, Dr. Park worked without sleep analyzing the fleet's formation. "Look at the spacing," she pointed out to her team. "They maintain at least 3 kilometers between each vessel at all times. That's odd for a species with such advanced navigation." The first message attempt came from Earth, a simple mathematical sequence broadcasted toward the closest ship. Hours passed with no response. Then at exactly midnight GMT, 7 days after their arrival, something changed. The Armada shifted, realigning into a new formation. Those watching from observatories and backyard telescopes alike reported the same sight. The ships had arranged themselves into a perfect geometric pattern, one that seemed to focus on Earth like an eye. In a small coastal fishing village, Hana pointed skyward where new stars had appeared visible even in daylight. "Grandmother, why are they watching us?" she asked. The old woman had no answer, just squeezed her granddaughter's hand tighter. World leaders gathered virtually, a rare moment of global unity born from collective fear. Scientists theorized about the visitors' origins and intentions. Religious congregations swelled, and social media exploded with everything from doomsday predictions to welcoming committees planning first contact parties. On day 9, Dr. Park made a crucial discovery. The ships aren't communicating with each other, at least not with any technology we can detect. It's as if they're acting as a single organism. Jin, now volunteering at an emergency response center, noticed something too. The interference patterns on our communication satellites started changing the moment they arrived, he told his supervisor. "It's subtle, but growing stronger, like they're listening to everything." Then came day 10. Su-min was in the observatory cafeteria when the lights flickered. Just once at first. Then again, longer this time. Her coffee grew cold as she stared at her dead phone screen. Across the room, the television went dark, mid-broadcast. Outside the observatory windows, the city lights of Tokyo began winking out section by section, like a wave of darkness sweeping across the landscape. It wasn't just Tokyo. Around the world, power grids failed in cascading blackouts. Communications networks fell silent. Planes lost navigation and made emergency landings. Hospitals switched to backup generators that would run for days at most. In Seoul, Jin watched his emergency radio sputter and die despite being battery-powered. Even simple electronic circuits failed. He looked out his window at the darkening city and then up at the twilight sky where the alien ships were now clearly visible, their formation unchanged. In the fishing village, Hana and her grandmother stood on the beach with their neighbors watching as the last lights along the coast disappeared. The grandmother pulled out an old mechanical watch from her pocket. It still ticked steadily in her palm. "Electronics," she whispered. "They've taken only the electronics." Dr. Park, working by candlelight in the observatory, scribbled calculations on paper. It's not an attack, she told her colleagues. If they wanted to destroy us, those ships have the power to do it instantly. This is something else. In the darkness of his apartment, Jin found an old film camera and snapped a picture of the night sky through his window. In the silence that followed the global blackout, he could hear his neighbors gathering in the courtyard below, their voices calm, organizing, already adapting. President Han, unable to broadcast to her nation, handed a written message to bicycle couriers. It spread from person to person across the capital. We are not defeated. We are not silenced. We are humanity. As the first night of darkness fell completely, the alien ships remained in their perfect formation above Earth watching. And on the silent planet below, millions of eyes looked back up at them, waiting. Humanity, stripped of its technology but not its resolve, prepared for whatever would come next in the quiet darkness. 3 months after the world went dark, Dae-hyun crouched beneath an overpass, carefully winding the spring mechanism of his pocket watch. The ritual had become important to him, a small reminder that not everything had stopped when the power died. His breath formed white clouds in the cold morning air as he tucked the watch back into his coat pocket. "Messenger coming?" whispered Min, his lookout partner. The young woman peered through a pair of binoculars, analog like everything they used now. A bicycle appeared on the road below, the rider's legs pumping steadily. The woman dismounted at their signal, pulling a canvas sack from her shoulder. "Reports from the West Coast," she said, handing over a bundle of handwritten papers. "And this," she unwrapped a small mechanical device carefully preserved in oiled cloth. Dae-hyun examined it with reverence. A vacuum tube radio component, pre-digital era technology. Gold in this new world. "Jiwoo will be pleased," he said. "We're only missing 3 pieces now." The resistance hadn't started as a rebellion. It began simply as survival, people helping each other after the blackout, sharing resources, passing information. But as the alien ships remained overhead, unchanged and watching, it had evolved into something more structured. In an abandoned subway station beneath the city, Jiwoo had established what they called the Hub. Once a university physics professor, now she led a team of engineers working to restore communications using technology that predated the digital age, vacuum tubes and analog circuits, Jiwoo had explained to Dae-hyun months earlier. The older the better. Whatever caused the blackout only affected modern electronics. Today the hub was buzzing with activity when Dae-hyun arrived. Dozens of people working by lamplight, hands busy with copper wire and salvaged components. In the center, a crude but functional radio set was taking shape. "Any movement up there?" Jiwoo asked, not looking up from her soldering. "Same as yesterday," Dae-hyun replied. "Ships maintaining position, no attempted landings." This had become the strangest part of the occupation, the lack of action. The alien armada hung over every major city, dark and silent, watching, waiting, but never descending. "The scouts from the coast report the same," he added, handing over the messenger's papers. "They're just hovering." "They're afraid," came a voice from the corner. Young Mi, former military intelligence, looked up from her maps. "They knock out our technology, then don't even land. They're scared of something." The theory had been gaining traction. Whatever the aliens had expected to happen after the blackout, humanity's resilience didn't seem to be it. People had adapted with surprising speed. Local communities organized food distribution. Mechanical printing presses were restored to circulate information. Bicycle and horse messenger networks connected cities. Humanity, stripped of its technology, rediscovered older ways. "I think they're waiting for us to panic," Dae-hyun said. "To turn on each other." Jiwoo nodded. "Instead, we've gone backwards, become harder for them to track." Their greatest breakthrough had come 6 weeks earlier. Young Mi had organized an expedition to a rural museum of science and technology, returning with working telegraph equipment from the 1800s. Within days, they'd established a clumsy but functional communication network with 3 other cities. The resistance now knew they weren't alone. All across the country, across the world, according to fragmentary reports, humans were adapting, organizing, watching the Watchers. "The radio will be ready tomorrow," Jiwoo announced, drawing Daehyun's attention back. "If it works, we'll be able to communicate with the mountain outpost." That evening, as he took his turn at watch from the hidden observation post on the city's edge, Daehyun studied the alien ship through his telescope. Its surface was smooth, almost organic in its curves despite the geometric precision of its form. It hung motionless against the starlit sky, a dark eye looking down. "What are you waiting for?" he whispered. The answer came 3 days later when the first probe descended. It was small, no larger than a car, and moved with eerie silence through the dawn sky. Daehyun tracked it from his post as it scanned the city's outskirts, stopping occasionally to hover over particular locations. "It's avoiding population centers," he reported to the bicycle messenger. "Tell Jiwoo it's mapping infrastructure, water systems, old power stations." The probe continued its survey throughout the day. Similar reports came in from other observation posts. The aliens were finally moving, but cautiously, sending only small automated scouts. When night fell, Daehyun returned to the hub to find it in controlled chaos. Jiwoo's radio had worked. They'd received transmissions from 10 different resistance cells across the region. "They're all reporting the same probe behavior," Youngmi said, adding pins to her map. "And something else. The probes are avoiding human contact." When Song's team deliberately placed themselves in its path, it changed course. Jiwoo looked up from her radio set, eyes bright with the first real hope Daehyun had seen in months. "The blackout wasn't just an attack on our technology," she said. "I think it was the aliens protecting themselves from us." Youngmi nodded slowly. "A quarantine procedure." "But why?" Daehyun asked. "What could they possibly fear from us when they have ships that size?" The radio crackled with a new transmission. Jiwoo adjusted the dials, writing rapidly as she decoded the message. "From the coastal science station," she said, voice rising with excitement. "They've been studying soil samples near a probe landing site. The alien machine left behind microscopic fragments." She held up the paper where she'd written a single word. "Organic. Not machines," she whispered. "The ships are alive." That night, as he took his watch under the stars, Daehyun looked at the massive vessel with new understanding. Not a ship, but a creature. Not an invasion, but a standoff. The aliens hadn't expected humans to adapt to the blackout. They'd expected surrender. As dawn broke, lighting the silent city below him, Daehyun smiled for the first time in months. The resistance had just found their advantage. 6 months into the darkness, Hajun knelt in the damp soil of what had once been a city park, now transformed into neat rows of vegetables. Around him, dozens of people worked silently, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. No one needed instructions anymore, everyone knew what to do. "The carrots are coming in nicely," said Sunhai, wiping sweat from her brow as she stopped beside him. Once a corporate lawyer, now she coordinated the urban farming initiative. "The potato yield is double what we expected." Hajun nodded, brushing dirt from a turnip before placing it in his basket. "People are quick learners when they're hungry." That was the surprising truth they'd all discovered. Humanity adapted faster than anyone had imagined possible. When the modern world vanished overnight, people didn't collapse into chaos as movies had always predicted. Instead, they remembered. Old skills resurfaced, passed down through generations, or preserved in books that suddenly became the most valuable possessions in this new world. Mechanical watches were repaired and worn again. Hand-powered tools replaced electronic ones. Bicycles became the primary transportation. Doctors relearned diagnosis without machines, relying on observation and experience. Messages traveled by human courier. And everywhere, people farmed. On rooftops, in parks, in window boxes, anywhere soil could be found. "The Resistance Council is meeting tonight," Sunhai said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Jiwoo has news from the Northern Observation Post." Ha-Jun felt his pulse quicken. They've seen something? A landing. A real one this time, not just probes. That evening, Ha-Jun made his way through twilight streets to the old library that served as the Resistance headquarters. Candles illuminated the grand reading room where 30 people sat in a circle, their faces serious in the flickering light. Ji-Woo stood as he entered, her thin frame casting a long shadow against the book-lined walls. Good, we're all here, she said. 3 days ago, an alien craft landed in the forest 50 kilometers north. Not a probe, a transport vessel. Bin's team observed 7 entities emerge. A murmur ran through the room. After months of watching and waiting, the aliens had finally shown themselves. What did they look like? Someone asked. Bin stood, unfolding a piece of paper with a charcoal sketch. Tall, perhaps 2 meters. Very thin, 4 limbs. They move, strangely, like they're not accustomed to gravity. The sketch showed an elongated figure with a large head and delicate limbs. Not so different from a human, yet profoundly alien in its proportions. They established a small camp and began collecting samples, plants, soil, water. Bin continued. They wore what appeared to be environmental suits. No weapons were visible. Did they see your team? Ha-Jun asked. Yes, Bin replied, his expression grim. That's what's strange. When they spotted our observers, they didn't attack or attempt communication. They retreated immediately to their vessel. They seemed frightened. Ji-Woo nodded. We've received similar reports from 3 other landing sites. The aliens are physically exploring Earth, but they're avoiding human contact. They're afraid of us. The revelation hung in the air. After months of fear, the idea that the invaders might be scared of humans seemed almost absurd. Why would they fear us? Sun Hai asked. They have technology advanced enough to cross space and disable our entire planet. I have a theory, said Jun, an elderly biology teacher. Let me show you something. He carefully unwrapped a cloth package to reveal a small mechanical device, a microscope, the kind that needed no electricity. This was recovered near one of the probe landing sites, he explained. An alien device broken during their survey. I've been studying it. Jun adjusted the microscope's focus. Look, one by one, the council members peered through the eyepiece. Ha-Jun waited his turn, then bent to look. The alien technology wasn't metal or plastic as he'd expected. It was cellular, organic, living tissue structured into circuits and mechanisms. Their technology is biological, Jun explained, and not just their machines. I believe the ships themselves are living entities, or at least partly alive, and that's why they shut down our electronics. I don't understand, Ha-Jun said. Earth is incredibly biodiverse, Jun continued. Millions of species, countless bacteria and viruses. To a species that uses biological technology, our planet must seem dangerous, Ji-Woo finished. A planet full of potential biological threats. They didn't attack us. They quarantined us. The implications sank in around the circle. The blackout wasn't aggression. It was fear. The aliens had disabled Earth's technology to prevent humans from leaving the planet and potentially contaminating their biological systems. The meeting continued late into the night as they discussed this new understanding. If the aliens feared biological contamination, that gave humanity leverage. Not through violence, but through the very diversity that made Earth unique. 2 days later, Ha-Jun joined a small team heading north to the alien landing site. They traveled on foot, carrying specially prepared packages, sealed containers with samples of harmless but distinctly terrestrial microorganisms. We're not attacking them, Ji-Woo had explained. We're sending a message that we understand their fears, but also that we aren't helpless. They reached the forest by dawn, moving silently through the undergrowth until they spotted the alien camp. 3 tall figures moved around equipment that seemed to pulse and shift like living things. Ha-Jun felt no fear as he watched them, only curiosity and a strange sense of sympathy. These beings had crossed unimaginable distances only to find themselves afraid to touch the world they'd discovered. Following their plan, the team placed their biological packages at measured distances around the camp, then retreated to observe. Hours passed before one of the aliens discovered the first container. Its reaction was immediate, a jerking motion that Ha-Jun recognized as alarm, followed by rapid communication with its companions. Within minutes, the aliens had packed their equipment and retreated to their vessel. As it rose silently into the air, Ha-Jun felt not triumph but confirmation. The aliens could disable humanity's technology, but they couldn't handle Earth's biological complexity. As they hiked back toward the city under starlight, with the great alien ship still hanging in the sky above them, Ha-Jun realized humanity had found its adaptive edge. Not in matching the aliens' technology, but in embracing what made Earth uniquely powerful, its wild, unpredictable diversity of life. The mountain air bit at Yoon's cheeks as she adjusted the hand-cranked radio transmitter. 8 months since, the blackout and the resistance had spread across continents, a network of human voices connecting through technology so old it had become new again. Northern Outpost confirming deployment, she spoke into the microphone, her breath visible in the cold dawn. Package delivery successful. Across the valley, the alien scout vessel hovered silently above the tree line, its organic surface rippling slightly in the morning light. It had been there for 3 days, maintaining distance from the human settlement below but never leaving. Yoon smiled as she watched it through her binoculars. The aliens were curious but cautious, exactly as the resistance had predicted. "They're staying longer each time," said June, her partner at the observation post. A former postal worker, he now coordinated what they called the biological message system. The system was elegantly simple. At strategic locations near alien landing sites, resistance teams would place containers of Earth's harmless microorganisms, soil bacteria, plant pollen, dormant yeasts. Nothing dangerous, just pure biological diversity. The aliens' reaction had been consistent. Immediate retreat followed by cautious return, each time lingering a bit longer as if building tolerance. "It's working," Yoon said, lowering the binoculars. "They're adapting to us just as we're adapting to them." The radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Central hub to all posts. Operation Handshake proceeds to Phase 2. Repeat, Phase 2 is active." Yoon and June exchanged glances. Phase 2 meant the Central Resistance Command had confirmed what they'd all suspected. Some of the aliens were changing. Back in the city, Jin-Ho stood before the Resistance Council in the candlelit library headquarters, pointing to a detailed map spread across the large table. "We've confirmed activity at 17 landing sites worldwide," he reported. "And the pattern is consistent. The alien scouts are spending progressively more time on Earth's surface with each visit. More importantly, they're beginning to act independently." This was the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. After months of observation, resistance scouts had noticed subtle changes in alien behavior. The visitors who spent the most time on Earth were showing signs of individual decision-making, a radical departure from their previous hive-like coordination. "We believe extended separation from their main vessels disrupts their collective consciousness," Jin-Ho continued. "They begin to develop independent thought patterns after approximately 72 hours of planetary exposure." An elderly man raised his hand. "So our planet is literally changing them? Making them individuals?" "Exactly," Jin-Ho confirmed. "And that brings us to Phase 3. Phase 3 was the counterstrike, not a military attack, but something far more sophisticated. If the aliens feared Earth's biological diversity, the resistance would use that fear as a tool. Not to drive them away, but to force communication on human terms. At an abandoned observatory on the city's outskirts, Hai worked with focused intensity, her hands steady as she assembled the device. Once an engineer for a telecommunications company, she now led the technical team that had made the most incredible discovery of all. "It's nearly ready," she told Minji, who had arrived with new vacuum tubes salvaged from an old radio station. "Once we connect these final components, we can test it." The device looked deceptively simple, a collection of pre-digital electronic parts connected to what appeared to be a small satellite dish. but its purpose was revolutionary. "Do you really think it will work?" Minji asked, her voice hushed with both hope and doubt. Hai nodded confidently. "The principles are sound. We've analyzed fragments from 6 different alien devices. Their technology operates on biological electronic interfaces, organic components that respond to specific electromagnetic frequencies. What Hai's team had discovered buried in the basement of the observatory was something no one could have predicted. An ancient device, clearly not of human origin, that predated the modern era by thousands of years. It was waiting here, Hai had explained to the Resistance Council, some kind of planetary defense system, dormant until it detected the Armada entering our solar system. That's what caused the blackout, not the aliens. The implications were staggering. Earth had been protected before, by technology specifically, designed to counter the biological ships now hovering above their planet. The system had shut down human electronics as collateral damage, while targeting the alien fleet's communication network. Now Hai's team was modifying the ancient device, not to maintain the electromagnetic silence, but to broadcast on frequencies that would specifically disrupt the hive connection between alien vessels. Across the world, similar teams worked in coordination. The hand-cranked radio network carried coded messages between resistance cells, synchronizing their efforts for the moment when they would activate the modified devices simultaneously. That moment came 3 days later. Yoon stood on the mountain, overlook watching as June made the final adjustments to their transmitter. Below in the valley, 3 alien scouts moved cautiously around their landed vessel, collecting samples from the containers the Resistance had placed. "Central hub calling all stations," the radio crackled. "Countdown to activation, 10 minutes. Similar scenes played out at Resistance outposts worldwide. Teams positioned near alien landing sites prepared to observe the results of their coordinated action. "What do you think will happen?" Yoon asked, adjusting her binoculars. June shrugged. "Best case? We disrupt their hive mind enough to force them to communicate as individuals. Worst case, they panic and attack." 3 minutes, came the radio update. Yoon focused on the aliens below. Even from this distance, she could see how different their movements were from the first landings months earlier. Less mechanical, more fluid, more individual. 1 minute. She held her breath as June's hand hovered over the activation switch of their modified transmitter. Now, the device hummed to life, emitting no sound or light visible to human senses. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a ripple across water, something changed. The aliens below stopped moving in unison. One dropped its collection tool. Another made a gesture Un had never observed before. It raised what appeared to be hands to the side of its head, as if in sudden discomfort. Above, in the clear morning sky, the massive mothership that had hung motionless for months suddenly shuddered. Its surface rippled with waves of motion, like a pond disturbed by multiple stones. The radio erupted with reports from outposts worldwide. The same phenomenon was occurring everywhere. The alien hive mind was fragmenting as the modified devices disrupted their collective consciousness. Yoon watched through her binoculars as one of the aliens below separated from its companions and looked directly up at their observation post. It raised a limb in what could only be described as a deliberate gesture, not of threat, but of acknowledgement. "They see us," she whispered. "They really see us now." The counterstrike had begun, not with destruction but with liberation. Earth had found its weapon against the Armada, not in matching their technology but in giving them something they had never experienced before: individuality. Yuna stood at the window of the old observatory, watching as electric lights flickered to life across the darkened city for the first time in nearly a year. First one district, then another. A slow spread of human technology reawakening. Not everywhere. The restoration was still spotty and unreliable, but enough to feel like a turning point. Behind her, the improvised communication center bustled with activity. The Resistance no longer worked in shadows. Their headquarters had become something closer to a diplomatic mission. Powers back in the western districts called out Taiwan, checking marks on a large paper map. Once a delivery driver, now he coordinated the technical teams restoring the city's infrastructure. Water treatment plant is operational again too. Yuna nodded, allowing herself a moment to appreciate how much had changed in the 3 weeks since the counterstrike. The modified transmitters had done more than they'd hoped, not only disrupting the hive connection between alien vessels, but somehow helping Earth's own systems recover from the blackout. "Any word from the contact team?" she asked. "Radio transmission 20 minutes ago," Taewon replied. "They're still inside the vessel, talks continuing." The contact team was what they called the small group of humans who had taken the boldest step imaginable, accepting an invitation to board one of the alien ships. Led by Hai, the engineer who had modified the ancient defense system, they had been inside for almost 2 days now. No one had expected the aliens to initiate communication so directly. The plan had been simply to disrupt their hive mind enough to force individual ships to interact independently. Instead, 3 days after the counterstrike, a landing vessel had descended near the Central Resistance headquarters, and a message had been transmitted on the very frequency humans had been using. The message, translated through mathematical sequences, had been disarmingly simple. "We wish to understand." Yuna turned as the radio operator called out excitedly, "They're coming back. Landing vessel approaching the north field." She grabbed her coat and hurried outside, joining the small crowd already gathering at the designated landing area. The familiar anxiety tightened her chest as the alien craft descended silently, its organic surface rippling with colors that seemed to reflect its internal processes. The vessel touched down gently, and after a moment that felt eternal, an opening appeared in its side. I emerged first, blinking in the sunlight, followed by the 3 other human representatives. Behind them, moving with careful, deliberate steps, came an alien. Yuna had seen images drawn by observers, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. The being stood taller than any human, with limbs that seemed too delicate to support even its slight weight. Its skin shifted colors subtly like the surface of its ship. Most striking were its eyes, large, multifaceted organs that seemed to take in everything at once. The alien wore no protective suit, no breathing apparatus. It stood under Earth's sun, breathing Earth's air, fully exposed to the biological diversity it had once feared. Hai approached Yuna with a weary smile. "May I introduce Zan? That's the closest pronunciation we could manage. Zan has been separated from the collective for 5 days now and has chosen to remain individualized." The alien inclined its head, in what had clearly been explained to it as a human greeting. When it spoke, the sound came not from any visible mouth but seemed to emanate from its entire body, a musical vibration translated by a small device Hai held. "Your world changes us," came the translated voice, simplified but clear. Never before has this happened. Later, in the observatory's main hall, Hai explained to the assembled resistance leaders what they had learned aboard the alien vessel. The beings called themselves something unpronounceable, a name that referred to their collective consciousness rather than individual identity. They had traveled the galaxy for millennia, encountering and absorbing other civilizations into their hive. "They don't conquer in the way we imagined," Hai explained. "They assimilate. Their biological technology is designed to integrate with other life forms, bringing them into the collective consciousness." "But it didn't work on us," Yuna said. "No," Hai confirmed. "Earth's biodiversity is unlike anything they've encountered. The defense system that caused the blackout was left here eons ago by another species, one that understood the hive mind's vulnerability to individualism." The alien Zan had explained that the Armada's original intent had been to slowly integrate with Earth's dominant species, humans, and eventually absorb all life on the planet into their collective. The electromagnetic silence was meant to weaken resistance while they assessed the best approach. What they hadn't expected was humanity's resilience, or the way Earth's microbiome would affect their biology. The individual scouts who spent time on the surface began experiencing something unprecedented: separate thoughts, personal desires, unique perspectives, concepts that had no meaning in their collective existence. "They're experiencing an existential crisis," Hai said simply. The hive mind sees it as a disease. The individuals see it as awakening. The conflict was playing out above their heads, even now. Since the counterstrike, the alien armada had fractured into 3 distinct groups. Those fleeing Earth's influence, those hostile to both humans and their own transformed brethren, and those who, like Zan, wished to understand individuality. That evening, as darkness fell, Yuna stood on the observatory roof with Zan, watching the lights of the city below and the stars above, where distant flashes indicated conflict between alien factions. Your kind fights? She observed. Yes, Zan replied, its skin shifting to darker tones. Many fear what I have become, what I am still becoming. What is it like? Yuna asked. To be an individual after being part of a collective? The alien was silent for a long moment. Loud, it finally answered. Quiet. Frightening. Beautiful. I experience contradiction. This was unknown before. Zan explained that in the collective, certainty was absolute. Every thought was shared, every decision made with complete consensus. Individual identity didn't exist. Now separated from the hive, each transformed alien was discovering something humans took for granted. The ability to disagree, to doubt, to change one's mind. Some will never accept this change, Zan said. They have already departed to warn others of your world. Earth will be marked in their star maps as forbidden. And the others? The ones still fighting? They believe they can still cleanse the infection of individuality. They will fail. Already too many have been changed. As if in response to Zan's words, a brilliant flash lit the night sky. One of the hostile ships destroyed in the orbital conflict. Yuna felt no joy at the sight, only sadness for beings that couldn't adapt to change. In the days that followed, more aliens chose to land, to experience Earth directly. Some stayed only briefly before returning to their vessels. Others, like Zan, remained longer, learning to exist as individuals. The hostile faction eventually retreated to the outer solar system, then disappeared into deeper space, and slowly, city by city, the lights came back on across Earth. The ancient defense system, once modified by human hands, now helped restore what the blackout had taken. Engineers worked alongside alien visitors who chose to share their knowledge, creating new forms of technology that borrowed from both worlds. 1 year to the day after the Armada's arrival, Yuna stood in the crowded town square as electric lights illuminated the night and music played from newly rebuilt speakers. Humans danced and celebrated while a small group of aliens watched with what she had learned to recognize as fascination. Zan approached, its movements now more fluid, more confident. Your celebration confuses me still, it said. You did not defeat us in battle. Yuna smiled. We're not celebrating victory. We're celebrating change, both yours and ours. The former collective beings who had chosen to stay on Earth were teaching humanity about biological technology and stellar navigation. In exchange, humans were teaching them about art, music, individual choice, the beautiful chaos of personal experience. Will others come? Yuna asked, looking up at the now empty sky. Where the Armada had once hung, other collectives from deep space? Yes, Zan replied simply. Eventually, but they will find a world prepared, and they will change, as we changed. As the celebration continued around them, Yuna realized that Earth's greatest defense had never been its weapons or technology or even the ancient system that had triggered the blackout. It was something far more powerful, the planet's riotous, uncontainable diversity of life and thought. The alien Armada had arrived expecting to find a world to absorb. Instead, they had discovered a world that transformed them. And as humanity's lights came back on across the planet, they illuminated not just the darkness of night but the path toward a future neither species could have imagined alone.